Well, investors cheered the news this week that the Greek government survived a confidence vote, giving it some much-needed breathing space and a chance to implement its austerity measures. But the mood was short-lived. On Wednesday, the chairman of the Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, gave a gloomy assessment of the US's prospects and no hints that its current round of quantitative easing or money printing would be extended past the 30th of June. So where to for the global economy? For his take, I spoke to Citi's Global Chief Economist, Professor Willem Buiter. Professor Buiter, the European Central Bank, among others, has been painting a very dire picture of what would happen if Greece defaulted. Would it be that bad?
Well, default is never to be recommended, but the kind of end-of-the-world scenarios, layman plus, that the ECB has been peddling are, I think, either uninformed or irresponsible or both. A sovereign default, especially of a small nation whose sovereign debt is well understood, is simple in composition. We know who holds it. This need not be a major event. If certain private investors, especially banks, have, even after a year or so, still got excessive concentrated holdings of a defaulting sovereign's debt, then these institutions can get into trouble, and we have to handle that. But all in all, the sovereign default of Greece, if and when it comes, can be handled in an orderly way. There are many historical examples of that. And the ECB should not make things worse than they need to be by making markets more concerned and nervous.
In fact, the ECB is probably talking its own book, isn't it? Because it's one of the biggest creditors to Greece, if not the biggest.
Now, that is probably part of the story. They are the largest outright holders, probably, of Greek sovereign debt, at least the largest single institution holding Greek sovereign debt, and also they have significant indirect exposure to Greek sovereign and sovereign guaranteed debt that's offered as collateral by Greek banks at the Eurosystem. So yes, they are talking their book. Whether it's the main motivating force, I don't know. I think it may just partly be ignorance. Sovereign defaults haven't occurred in Western Europe since 1948, when then West Germany was the last one to default. In my mind, there is no doubt that, while a serious event, they can be handled if the right support is there, including support, active support from the ECB. They can be handled without creating serious fallout for the real economy, let alone a financial crisis in the Eurozone. That is really complete and utter nonsense.
Well, do you think that some sort of default or restructuring or reprofiling, whatever you want to call it, of Greece's debt and perhaps the other peripheral countries in Europe is inevitable?
Yes, I think that at least for Greece and Ireland and Portugal, a quite serious default restructuring involving large losses for the creditors, who, by the time that this actually happens, are likely to be mainly official creditors like the ECB and the various European facilities created to handle the crisis. Yes, this is indeed going to happen. In the short run, in fact in the very short run I hope, we will see what they call soft reprofiling or rollovers on a voluntary, in quotation marks, basis of some of the maturing Greek debt that will make the whole process less damaging and more orderly. So yes, there will be defaults. It's likely to start with a slow and easy rollover of existing debt maturity extension, but ultimately I think very large write-downs in Greek and Irish and Portuguese sovereign debt are likely, well, almost inevitable to occur.
You recently wrote that the United States fiscal fundamentals are worse than those of the peripheral countries in Europe, and you memorably summed up the situation as the fact that they've got social democratic spending and Tea Party taxing. Can you tell us what's the future of the United States in that context?
Well, I think Winston Churchill said that the US always does the right thing after all other alternatives have been tried, right? I am confident that the US sovereign, even though it is in dreadful fiscal condition, will neither default on its sovereign obligations nor resort to the inflation tax to square the circle. They will, in due course, choose fiscal pain, spending cuts and tax increases to resolve their yawning budgetary gap. Right? They need at least 8% of GDP worth of permanent tightening. If you were to start that today, that would be $1.2 trillion worth of fiscal tightening in a single year. It's my guess that the US will only turn to serious fiscal tightening following the election, and unless a single party is following the US presidency election in November 2012, unless a single party is control of both the White House and both houses of Congress, it will be market discipline, threatened increase in long-term rates, sharp increase in sovereign CDS rates that will force the US Congress to impose both higher taxes and spending cuts. And it may well be that it will take a loss of the US AAA status to bring about the necessary concentration of the minds.
Now, Australia is suffering a bout of Dutch disease, which I'm sure you know about because you're a Dutchman. Can you tell us what's the answer to that? I mean, does it just mean that we have to eventually just put our manufacturing industry to bed and possibly to the morgue eventually? Is there no way out of it?
Up to a point, that is inevitable. The only way to avoid this is to leave the stuff in the ground, right? And that would really not be wise. Now, the degree, however, to which this occurs, and whether or not it is subject to overshooting, depends on domestic policies, especially fiscal policy. So the way to minimize the degree of the Dutch condition and stop it from turning into a Dutch disease or even natural resource curse is to use tight fiscal policy and to save, privately or publicly, a large part of the windfall gains, rather than all spending it immediately. And where you spend it on investments, private or public, that yield their returns over a long period. Fiscal tightening, high national saving rates are the way to minimize the severity of the Dutch disease. Anything else, including monetary policy, is second order.
And finally, what's your forecast for the Australian dollar and the Australian economy over the next couple of years?
I expect the currency actually to strengthen further somewhat for what it's worth. I'm not going to give you a number because I expect that global growth will continue quite robustly, and that as a result commodity prices will remain strong and may even strengthen further going into the second half of the year and into 2012. And that will put upward pressure on the Australian exchange rate. As regards growth, of course, you had trouble with Mother Nature there, with one half of the country drowning and the other half burning not that long ago. Assuming we don't have comparable disasters, I think that the economy can grow at a rate of 3 or 4%, possibly, provided the labour supply is there to accommodate the demand for labour that will be associated with these kind of growth rates. You can, of course, take up part of the necessary labour, find it out of the reservoir of the unemployed, and the rest will depend on the immigration policy, which is, of course, a matter for national discretion.
Thanks for joining us, Willem Buiter.
Pleasure.